What's going on, guys? This is Rob, and if you're enjoying the content here on my channel, then make sure you hit the like button and make sure you hit subscribe so you can help decide what direction the content on my channel goes in the foreseeable future. Okay, so following Extremis, I was in kind of a weird spot. Honestly, I'm really just kind of experimenting on you guys. I'm experimenting insofar that I am curious how you guys respond to covering older videos instead of all new, all different Marvel until like August or September or so, when like Marvel Legacy drops, versus how you guys respond to covering all new, all different Marvel stuff. I mean, there'll be a few things here and there that we cover, like Old Man Logan and Ultimates and stuff like that, but because it takes 6 months to finish a story, you know, I was like, well, I mean, we can kind of cover some older stuff in between, so I'm just kind of curious to how you guys respond to that whole thing. But as I was thinking about that, there were two different routes that we could have taken with Iron Man. We could have covered Iron Man Volume 4, or we could have covered Iron Man Volume 5. 4 is longer than 5. And 5, of course, you know, being newer is more modern, and really kind of ties into a lot of what people are talking about in terms of what's going on with Iron Man right now. And so I figured we kind of do 5, since we could probably get about 6 or 7 videos out of it, and then call it a day. And that'll really give me a good litmus test on how you guys respond to things. So if by the time this is all said and done, you guys make it clear that you just don't care about older stuff and you want all new, all different Marvel, then we'll switch back to that. We may be able to find a happy balance with both. But with regards to this one of the other reasons that I chose that is because with Extremis fresh on our minds, this one deals directly with the fallout of that, but there are a couple things to run over, specifically with Volume 4. Nothing super complicated, nothing really difficult or convoluted. With the character of Maya Hansen, for example, she was basically arrested at the end of the Extremis storyline in Volume 4, released on parole, and then she went to go work for S.H.I.E.L.D. and Tony Stark, because at the time, Tony Stark was director of S.H.I.E.L.D. following the events of Civil War. And so because of that, it was really just kind of her proving the fact that she was more or less reformed. The whole idea with Extremis was just kind of part of her past, and she was ready to let that go. And that was really it. I mean, it was just kind of a way to, you know, build her character a bit. The other half of this is that in the post-Civil War landscape, Iron Man Volume 4 stretched through a lot of things and went all the way up to like Siege and so on and so forth. What ended up happening is going into Siege, and really even after the events of Civil War, when Tony Stark's moral compass was called into question, the idea that maybe he'd been fighting on the wrong side for all the wrong reasons, he more or less kind of suffered this crisis of conscience. And so after being ousted as director of S.H.I.E.L.D., he basically formed a company called Stark Resilient, which basically served the purpose of being like a more economic friendly arm, where Stark International was more of like a weapons manufacturing arm of Stark. Resilient was going to focus more on the everyday things, so just improving technology overall for the betterment of society itself. The issue with this is that it made him a target for a multitude of different people, you know, injure those that he cared about, Pepper Potts and so on and so forth. And so Tony Stark actually left Resilient and made Pepper Potts the CEO. So those are guys who were reading like Superior Iron Man, that's where that came from. Volume 4 has some cool things here and there, but I think that Volume 5 is more pertinent to just cool Iron Man stuff. Now, this particular story arc is called Believe, and what this does is deal with the fallout of Extremis, and it tells us that Extremis did not go away, that Extremis is very much there. Now, what we do here is we actually pick up in Buenos Aires, Argentina, with Maya Hansen. Now, the crazy thing about this is that she's being pursued by AIM, Advanced Idea Mechanics. Now, here's the thing. Advanced Idea Mechanics originally started out as like the science/technology arm of Hydra, with the goal of world domination. Eventually, AIM broke away from Hydra following the death of Baron von Strucker and became their own organization, but they still had the same goal of like dominating the world. But for example, Advanced Idea Mechanics were the first ones to create a cosmic cube. And so again, they have all kinds of different, you know, studies and so on, but Extremis is just another instance of them trying to launch a plot that will see them, you know, trying to secure world domination. And so the result of this is that Maya Hansen in her panic sends out an automated message, Tony Stark gets it, and basically it's her saying, look, you know, this is an automated message informing you that if you get this, I'm likely dead, and Extremis is on the loose again. Now, this is kind of cool, because the first place we go to is basically one group that's managed to take hold of Extremis, and this is basically just an organization that's more or less Advanced Idea Mechanics themselves. Now, of course, the cool thing about this is that a lot of what we end up seeing here, you know, in this conflict between Tony Stark, the fact that he basically has armor that's in a liquid state, this all really kind of lays the groundwork for like Indesim armor, for example, that he has in Superior Iron Man, different things like that. And that's why I said Volume 5 is a little more pertinent in terms of Iron Man and as far as you guys think of him, because of the fact that there's so many interesting things in here that lay the groundwork for what comes later. Of course, really all that stuff, you know, Indesim, the whole 9 yards, that whole predecessor was Extremis. The fact remains here here that Tony Stark basically locating, finding AIM, getting a hold of their head guys was really quick and it was really simple. I mean, AIM was purporting that Extremis would be like the next stage in technology or something along those lines, and the idea was to basically use it for their own ends. Now, of course, the question that Tony Stark has is, where is the rest of Extremis? What's going on here? Now, eventually he manages to find himself mixed up with some of the guys of Advanced Idea Mechanics who have reached beyond and actually have a place called New Avalon. Now, Tony Stark himself as Iron Man has intrigued quite a few people. In this particular instance, it's really more of like a battle. It's more of like a conflict. What these guys have done is they have taken Extremis, they've made it into actual armors, and then brought in basically people who specialize in a multitude of different things, whether it's hand-to-hand combat, being a pilot, whatever the case may be. And the idea here is to run a gauntlet. Can they be as good as Tony Stark? Because keep in mind, in the realm of Marvel Comics, when it comes to like mechanized suits or technology or something like that, Tony Stark is the #1 guy in terms of weaponizing technology. Now, in terms of overall intelligence, it's kind of a toss-up. I mean, in All New, All Different Marvel, they established that Moon Girl's like the smartest girl on the planet. But prior to that, it was like Reed Richards, Valeria Richards, and Dr. Doom who held the #1 spot. And now who it was actually #1 would change based on the story, but those three were generally the smartest people on the planet. In terms of weaponizing technology, Tony Stark is the #1 guy, and the Iron Man suit is the title to beat. If these guys, these pilots in these Extremis suits can beat Iron Man, then it means that this weapon is a success, that, you know, Extremis, as it's been used by this organization, will effectively work. They can in turn build more suits, hand those over, and gain new contracts with the US government to really replace what it is that Tony Stark does. Now, the cool thing about all this is that it basically creates a scenario whereby Iron Man himself is basically able to function at peak capacity. And what I mean by this is Tony Stark's armors are usually modular whenever it comes to like, the different equipment and stuff that he uses. And what that means is that different aspects of the suit can be detached and something else can be put in its place. And that's really the nature of it here. It's an invitation to use all the tools at his disposal and see if he can face off against each one of these individual guys. And for the most part, he's successful. He manages to stave off the attacks of almost every single one of these guys. The goal is that if he wins, he ultimately gets to take the Extremis with him. And so the cool thing about this is that some of these guys specialize in hand-to-hand combat, and the suits reflect that accordingly, in the sense that they're really more kind of in Tony Stark's face, punching, kicking, so on and so forth. Others are better at flight, at diverting attacks, playing more defensively. And so it's really kind of cool to see how these armors relate to what it is that Iron Man has. But at the end of the day, they are not Tony Stark. They do not have the ability to capitalize on their own skills in the same capacity that Tony Stark has the ability to capitalize on his. And so, of course, fighting these guys really serves as a distraction. And what he basically does is just kind of snatch up the Extremis kit and then just take off. I mean, really the most dishonorable way to end the conflict is just kind of grab the thing and then just bolt. And that's really it. I mean, it's kind of it's kind of a crappy thing to do. But what this is designed to do is basically give us a tour of how Extremis can be used in different ways. This next guy actually uses it for medical purposes, and it's really kind of cool. Again, because of the fact that Maya had sent Tony Stark a notification saying, hey, look, here are the versions of Extremis that have managed to get out. Here are their, unique identity signatures. It's basically just tracking down these different locations, traveling to those locations, and facing off against people. The other half of this is we actually get to see a little bit of expansion on the various suits that Tony Stark uses. For example, one of these suits is one where he basically has the ability of camouflage, where he can bend light around himself. Now, if you're interested in the different suits that Tony Stark uses, I have like 4 or 5 videos that I did where we basically run over each one of his suits and what it is that they're capable of doing. Again, this one in particular is one that we had referenced previously, where he's able to basically bend light around himself to either make him invisible or to camouflage himself and create holograms. But once he ends up getting into this particular building where this Extremis kit is being located at, and he gets down to the basement, he actually finds a girl in bed, but then also comes across some members of his rogues gallery. Now, this is also kind of cool because it shows us some of the other ways that Extremis can be used, not in the sense of creating suits of armor, but in the sense of enhancing people's already existing abilities. The Living Laser, Firebrand, Vibro, these are guys that have their own intrinsic capabilities and powers. For example, Firebrand manipulates fire. Under normal circumstances, she's no real threat to Tony Stark, but with Extremis enhancements, her powers are pushed that much further. Not only that, because it's designed to enhance the human body, her physical agility, her strength, so on and so forth, all these things are increased. Now again, Tony Stark is coming out of all of this having dealt with Extremis before, and so it's not like he's taken by surprise the same way he was with Malin. Instead, all of his suits were upgraded to be able to withstand virtually any scenario when it comes to the Extremis tech. He'll sit down and he'll encounter a situation that he's never met before. He'll overcome his situation, and then he'll sit down and say, okay, under what circumstances could I encounter encounter this scenario again. What million ways could this scenario play out? And then every last one of his suits will be upgraded to meet that particular scenario. In this instance, because of the fact that this is Rogue's Gallery, he's fought all these different guys time and time again. His suits are already equipped for the most part to be able to handle that. In truth, these guys are taken out pretty easily. I mean, they're defeated pretty readily. But of course, with a living laser having charged through a wall, what this does is it tells Tony Stark that he probably charged through multiple walls, meaning that just following the holes in the wall is basically what it is. But the fact remains that once he gets inside this room, this is an instance where not everybody who captures Extremis uses it for nefarious ends. And this particular guy has a daughter that's basically dying of cancer. And the idea was to use Extremis for the purpose of trying to find a way to cure her. The issue here is that this guy does not know the ins and outs of Extremis. He's smart, but he doesn't quite know how to use it or how to modify it in a way that will benefit his daughter. And so what he did is he actually kidnapped several people or used several people and injected them with Extremis, hoping that he'd be able to find a way to basically cure his daughter. The issue is that, for the first person, it didn't matter. They effectively ended up dying. For the second person, they were cured, but his daughter is extremely sick in the same capacity as the first person. And so really, what seems to be the case is that there's no way for his daughter to be rescued. In comes Tony Stark with an inoculation that's basically going to cure this guy's daughter. But the problem with this is that this guy broke the law. Despite his desperation, despite the fact that he wanted to keep his daughter safe, at the end of the day, he still broke the law. And so the result of this is that he's basically going to be arrested and taken to jail, but his daughter's gonna live. So again, it's kind of a cool scenario to see how Tony Stark deals with these different versions of the Extremis virus. Now from here, we switch over to the Catacombs in Paris. If you guys ever get a chance, you should definitely look it up. There are people who will party. They'll go and they'll have parties and stuff like that, and they'll go into the Catacombs, especially if they're not from France, they'll get lost and they'll die. They'll starve to death because it is a labyrinth down there. It's absolutely insane. With regards to this whole thing in Paris, Tony Stark, of course, realizes that one of the signals is coming from the Catacombs. Now, the Catacombs themselves are a small, tight space, which means there's no real room for maneuverability, and so Tony Stark plans accordingly and basically adopts one of the newest versions of the Hulkbuster armor. Now, this is a Hulkbuster / a general tank all-purpose suit in the sense that it's not designed explicitly for the Hulk, but it certainly can help. So once he gets down there, what he finds is a veritable bloodbath. I mean, it's absolutely insane. There's just body parts, just pieces of scientists all over the place. Well, of course, this leads him to coming across something like 12 or 13 women who have these different etchings carved on their faces. Now, this is when things get kind of weird, and in truth, it's played pretty fast and loose. The idea from one of the scientists seems to be that they were trying to resurrect the Great Black Infinite. We're not told what that is. Honestly, it doesn't matter. It's really just kind of Kieran Gillen saying these are crazy religious fanatics, and as a result, they ended up just creating monsters with no understanding of what it was that they were doing. But this tells us that basically when Extremis, when Maya Hansen was forced to recreate it by AIM, and it was sold by AIM, it was, hey man, whoever wants to buy it can have it. We don't care what you do with it. And so again, it's really kind of wild here just because of the fact that one of the scientists that's left tries to take out Tony Stark. Of course he fails, but in doing so, where this scientist had all these different, etchings and stuff around the door in order to keep himself protected, with the door destroyed, the protection's no longer there. And this guy's basically just kind of torn to pieces. Now, this is when we get into one of the darker sides of Tony Stark. And the reason why is because of the fact that, of course, he has his new AI essentially replicate the symbols that were previously on the door to create a kind of, protective aura around himself, after which, all these different young women just kind of enter a pacified state. But because of the fact that Extremis, if allowed to manifest for too long, basically corrupts and destroys the minds of the people who have ingested it, what it basically means is that there's no saving these girls. They're too far gone. In truth, all Tony Stark can really do is just issue a mercy killing. And that's exactly what he does. He basically just begins using a high intensity laser to incinerate these girls' heads. Now, this is dark, but it's also as humane as Tony Stark can possibly be. They don't feel a thing. I mean, 1 minute there's a bright light, the next, that's it. That's all she wrote. And so it takes 20 seconds for it to charge, which means that if he's issuing out 11 or 12 shots, he's got to wait a little over 2 minutes in order to basically take out all these different folks. And so because of that, it's pretty intense and it takes a toll, because for him, he's basically killing people. And if at all possible, Tony Stark always tries to keep people alive unless there's absolutely no choice. And in this instance, there was really no choice. And so what ends up happening is this last little Extremis kid actually takes us into space. And it's really kind of cool the way that this happens, just because of the fact that one of the people, or at least really one of the guys, that is taking this is a guy named Eli. Now, of course, Eli and Tony Stark go back quite a bit in the sense that they've been both, comrades, and they've, been soldiers at arms, so to speak, on the front line of the technological arms race and different things like that. But Eli is actually using Extremis for a pretty interesting concept. Historically speaking, Extremis has always been weaponized. Ever since the virus was created and released, people have always weaponized it. Now, I mean, in this instance, we see people who are trying to use it for medical means, but 9 times out of 10, it's being used in some form of weaponry. What this guy, Eli, wants to do is actually use it for the purpose of exploration. In his mind, humanity's limited on the planet Earth. We talked about this when Iron Man joined the Guardians of the Galaxy, and actually the way this story ends will go directly into Guardians of the Galaxy, so I might put it in that playlist just for the sake of it. But the fact remains here that with regards to humanity on Earth, humanity is very primitive, relatively speaking, to like all the other species. I mean, you got to think, the Kree Empire stretches systems, solar systems. The Skrull Empire is the exact same way. The Shi'ar Empire is an amalgamation of different races. And here you have humanity stuck on a singular planet. This guy using Extremis is to basically say, why be limited by such a basic thing? Why would you want to weaponize Extremis? I mean, use it for exploration. And so the goal is to reprogram Extremis so that it can be modified in the human genome to allow people to walk on Mars without suits and basically begin the process of colonizing other planets, looking to the future. Now, under normal circumstances, Tony Stark would agree with this. And in fact, he says that. He says, look, I would agree with you. I'd be behind you 100% of the way under any normal circumstance. If this was sanctioned by the federal government, if like Reed Richards had a hand in it or something like that. But if I can come in here, then that means Doctor Doom can come in here. It means that like Magneto could come in here. It means any number of villains could just walk in and take it. And then suddenly they've just got a ridiculous amount of power. What this does is it leads to the most logical outcome, a conflict between Tony Stark and, Eli and his various forces. Now, of course, again, this is Tony Stark playing it smart. It's him sitting down and saying, look, we're in a space station out in the middle of nowhere. They're not going to shoot bullets just because of the fact that if they did, all it would take is a pinprick of a hole in a wall, and then suddenly it's just explosive decompression. Oxygen just goes violently escaping out of the hole. Next thing you know, the whole space station blows up, and it takes all of us with them. And so in his mind, he knew that they were simply going to go for incapacitating him. Well, because of the fact that he's wearing a mechanized suit, they would use electronics. And so as a result, he basically reconfigures his suit to cope with any kind of electromagnetic interference, which allows him to maintain the suit's functionality, and then in turn, take all these different guys out, after which he grabs the Extremis kit and takes off. And so what ends up happening here is Tony Stark goes back and has a conversation with Pepper Potts. And it's really kind of cool to see this because he says, look, after Civil War, after Secret Invasion, after being director of S.H.I.E.L.D., being forced out of S.H.I.E.L.D., after starting Resilient, then having to leave Resilient, after faking my death, after all these things that have happened, I'm ready to take a break. Like, I'm ready to clear my head. I'm tired of being on Earth. I'm ready to go out. I'm ready to do something else. I'm ready to go experience something else, do any number of things. And so what he does is he basically dons a suit specialized for interstellar travel, for traveling the spaceways. And he essentially just leaves the planet Earth. He basically just takes off. And as a result, this is when he joins the Guardians of the Galaxy. But with that being said, guys, if you are new here to Comics Explained, make sure you guys hit the sub button to become part of the Rob Corps. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you drop a like, and yeah, I will catch you guys later. Peace.